This hearing will come to order. I want to welcome everybody to the hearing room. I appreciate your attendance. I certainly want to welcome all our witnesses. I know your stories will be hard to tell, but I truly appreciate you making the time and willing to share your stories. In our first hearing of this Congress titled "The Corruption of Science and Federal Health Agencies, How Health Officials Downplayed and Hid Myocarditis and Other Adverse Events Associated with the COVID-19 Injections," I asked Dr. Joel Walscock, an orthopedic surgeon injured by the COVID injections, to describe how those suffering from COVID injection injuries felt. His one-word answer: abandoned. The purpose of today's hearing, titled "Voices of the Vaccine Injured," is very simple: to give a platform to those individuals and families who have been abandoned, their injuries and suffering dismissed and forgotten. In addition, we will also hear from witnesses whose lives were devastated by fatal cases of severe influenza. We all fear death and disease. The appeal of a simple shot that can prevent both is obvious and powerful. Unfortunately, this strong appeal has overridden critical thinking and prevented rigorous cost-benefit analysis from being done. The faith in vaccines and vaccination policy is protected with religious-like zeal, and those questioning them are viewed as apostates, dangerous apostates, more than deserving of the scorn, vilification, and retribution heaped upon them. An open-minded review of the history of vaccination dating back to Edward Jenner, the creator of the smallpox vaccine, is both interesting and enlightening. Reading books like Dissolving Illusions, Turtles All the Way Down, and Vaccines, Mythology, Ideology, and Reality, or a May 21st, 2025 Substack by Toby Rogers titled "Mapping the Entire Field of Autism Causation Studies in One Article," certainly opened my eyes, and I sincerely hope will open millions more. And while I haven't mentioned it, I'd like to enter Toby Rogers' article Substack into the record without objection. It'll be entered. Understanding the recent history of vaccines is essential to developing a fair-minded viewpoint. In the early 80s, investigative journalists and lawsuits were beginning to highlight the harms caused by vaccines. This led to jury awards for injuries and the withdrawal of pharmaceutical companies from vaccine manufacturing and distribution. The availability of vaccines was at risk. This legitimate concern was addressed with the passage of the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act of 1986, which led to blanket immunity for vaccines through subsequent regulation. An explosion in the number of vaccine doses on the childhood schedule was a result. According to Mr. Rogers, quote, "Prior to 1986, there were 3 routine vaccines totaling 7 injections. Today, the CDC's maternal and child and adolescent vaccine schedules include 19 vaccines requiring 76 injections with 94 total doses of antigen. In August 1997, the FDA under President Clinton's administration issued draft guidance to allow pharmaceutical companies to advertise directly to consumers beyond print media into TV and radio. According to one estimate, drug companies spent $10 billion on direct-to-consumer advertising in 2024, currently accounting for almost 25% of evening news ad minutes on major networks. That amount of spending has paid off handsomely for Big Pharma and its ability to control the narrative and suppress stories of drug and vaccine injuries. But to understand the true reality we face, there's nothing like hearing from those who have suffered the adverse events that are rarely acknowledged by the medical establishment, federal health agencies, and the corporate media. Today, we have 5 witnesses who will tell how drug and vaccine injuries have impacted their lives. We will also hear from 2 witnesses who advocate for, quote, "routine immunizations across the lifespan," unquote, because they lost loved ones from a disease vaccines were intended to prevent. Thank you for all taking the time to appear before us today. As difficult as it will be for you to testify today, it's important for the American public to hear your testimony. Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to our witnesses and welcome to all the visitors who have come to this hearing. I suspect that we have diverse views in our audience, And I welcome all of you, regardless of your views, because I think your being here is immensely important to give voices and faces to what we will hear from our witnesses by way of their testimony. The loss of a loved one, as we all know, leaves an indelible imprint on our lives. It creates an unfillable gap that is almost impossible to overcome at the time it happens, and time sometimes heals, sometimes not. I feel a very deep empathy for the pain and heartache experienced by everyone on this panel, and I thank you for your courage, whatever your testimony is going to be, your courage and conviction coming forth today. Parents and loved ones should never have to know the type of heartache that comes with the loss of a child, and it's a loss that was common, all too common, before vaccines were developed. Smallpox killed approximately 500 million people in the 100 years before it was declared eradicated in 1980. 90% of deaths are believed to have occurred in children under 10 years old. But that risk was eliminated thanks to vaccines that led to smallpox becoming the only disease to have been completely wiped out on the globe. Parents, I will say, including my own, with my brother and me, used to live in fear of their children contracting polio. I will never forget one summer when my brother had a very high fever, all of the symptoms of polio. The anxiety level in our house was incomparable. I was barely old enough to understand what might happen. In bad years, 15,000 United States children were permanently paralyzed. But again, thanks to vaccination, those fears no longer permeate our society. Despite enormous advances made over the last century, still far too many people, many of them children, die of vaccine-preventable illnesses every year. I'm reading a book right now called Everything is Tuberculosis. It's by John Green. It's on the New York Times bestseller list, so I don't need to give you all the details of information. It is about tuberculosis and about how treatments and medicine is available for tuberculosis, which could eradicate it, but for many of the deep suspicions and anxieties in developing countries. One of the characters in this book, it's nonfiction, is a young boy who at 5 years old was stopped from treatment by his father because of his distrust for medicine and his reliance on other kinds of cures. I am deeply grateful to Eric Stein, who lost his 4-year-old sister, and to Cerise Murata, who suffered the tragic death of her 5-year-old son, for their courage in coming forward to share their stories with us today. Stories like theirs were once the norm. At the beginning of the last century, infant mortality in the United States was more than 100 times higher than it is today, and over 60% of those dead children succumbed to infectious disease. A century later, thanks to, in large part, widespread vaccination, that figure has dropped to 2%. But as you will hear today, the fact that these deaths are now rare doesn't make them any less tragic. And every one of them is a tragedy for parents who survive, parents like Catherine Al-Qaidi. In January 2012, Catherine's infant son, Brady, died in her arms from pertussis, commonly known as whooping cough, at just 2 months old. And I would like to give her the opportunity to talk to you directly, recounting her unimaginable loss. And if you could play the video that we have.
Hi, my name is Catherine Alcade from Chicopee, Massachusetts. Our son Brady passed away in 2012 from whooping cough. He was born November 20th, 2011 and passed away January 28th, 2012. Brady was a very happy, very healthy baby boy. After the holidays, Brady developed a cough. We were in and out of the hospital trying to figure out what was going on. His breathing, couldn't keep food down, and eventually it worsened. Brady spiked a fever. We took him back to the emergency room where he was admitted to Bay State Medical Center. We spent the next 10 days with tests, breathing tubes, feeding tubes, trying to stabilize him and get through the hard part of the disease. Unfortunately, Brady was not stable enough and needed further care, where they transferred us to Boston Children's Hospital. Unfortunately, halfway through the route, Brady's heart stopped. Unfortunately, with tests run by neurologists, it was found that Brady had no brain activity, and shortly after, he passed. The whooping cough diagnosis came a few weeks later. We were never able to pinpoint exactly where or how he contracted the disease, but it was likely from an unvaccinated person who may not have noticeable symptoms. My baby boy, at 2 months, 2 weeks old, passed away in my arms on January 28th, 2012. This is his story, and I'm appreciative that we're able to share it with you all today. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine Alcade. Someone else's decision not to get vaccinated likely caused her child to be taken away from her, devastating her family. I fear stories like Catherine's will become more and more common in the years ahead. This year, the United States is on track to record more cases of whooping cough than it has in 7 decades. Already, at least 3 children have died, and this disease is just the beginning. Rates of vaccination against a range of debilitating and deadly diseases have fallen rapidly in the last few years, driven by unfounded claims from opportunistic actors. We're already paying a price. 25 years ago, measles was declared eliminated in the United States of America, but barely halfway through this year, our country has more cases of measles than it has had for more than 3 decades. 3 people, 2 of them children, are dead. And I have a poster with some of the measles headlines. These headlines help tell a story that, in detail, is being lived by Americans. And these deaths are made even more tragic by the fact that they were totally and completely preventable. The measles vaccine is safe and effective. It's not only been proven through clinical tests and trials, but by everyday experience of Americans. There have been persistent falsehoods about vaccines continuing to harm our communities, and this misinformation is not only driving down vaccination rates, it's compromising research into the very harms that we need to prevent. Nowhere is this point clearer than with autism. Decades of scientific research have shown conclusively that vaccines do not cause autism. At this time, I would like to enter into the record 6 scientific papers that have shown that vaccines do not cause autism. If there's no objection, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection.
They're here. Anyone is free to look at them. These include studies done over decades involving hundreds of thousands of children and a comprehensive analysis from the National Institute of Medicine concluding that epidemiological studies, quote, consistently provided no evidence of association between vaccines and autism. This epidemiological research is important and persuasive. Autism research is critically important and has made great strides in recent years. Yet every dollar we devote to studying this thoroughly debunked claim is a dollar taken away from much more promising research. A dollar taken away from educators in special needs classrooms, a dollar taken away from caregivers to help overwhelmed parents. The truth is that for children born in the United States between 1994 and 2023, routine childhood vaccination is estimated to have saved well over 1 million lives. The truth is that telling parents to use cod liver oil to stop measles rather than vaccines has sent innocent children to the hospital with vitamin A toxicity. The truth is that in the past decade, over 42,000 women in the United States have died from cervical cancer, a cancer that is almost entirely preventable by the HPV vaccine. Today, vaccines, in a way, are a victim of their own success. Parents today do not have to spend terrified nights in the hospital wondering what will become of their child with diphtheria, a disease that, until the vaccine was developed in the 1940s, regularly killed as many as 15,000 children every year, or rubella, which until a vaccine was developed in 1969 regularly infected more than 50,000 people, resulting in tens of thousands of babies born deaf, blind, or with congenital heart disease. We cannot afford to turn back the clock. Scientific advancement has given us great benefits. We need to make sure that every medicine, every vaccine, every treatment or cure available to Americans goes through proper testing and clinical trials and is proved to be safe and effective. Nobody wants Americans exposed to side effects or dangers as a result of any medical treatment. But we should be mindful of the benefits after they are proven safe and effective, the scientifically proven benefits. And I want to thank our witnesses for coming forward today to share your views, your stories. We look forward to learning from you and working to make America safer and healthier. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal. The truth is, vaccine injuries are real and they've been ignored. Let's go to a video before we swear in the witnesses.
During the nationwide Vaxxed and CHD bus tours, the compelling stories of thousands of individuals devastated by vaccines were videotaped. The two bus tours together collected over 12,000 signatures on behalf of people who were injured or died from vaccines. What follows is a small sample of the 2,400 video testimonies obtained during those tours.
She was born completely healthy, normal, beautiful, light of my life, light of my family's life. She did receive hepatitis B vaccine and became severely jaundiced, just severe. It just kept telling me everything was normal, and I knew something was really, really wrong. You don't believe your child is gone until they come tell you for real that she's gone. I was told SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. And in the support group meetings I went to, every parent, every single parent there would bring up vaccines and ask. Every story had vaccines involved. A lot of a child died the next day. Got vaccines, high-pitched scream, projectile vomit, whatever, until they died within less than 24 hours. So we were all asking our SIDS support group leader, is there a connection? It just seems like all of us feel like vaccines are involved.
He was very athletic, he was very smart, and just a very caring and loving child. I did exactly what the doctor said. I took Cameron, who was sick, and I gave him the flu shot. He had a fever. I couldn't break the fever. By Monday morning, he was having seizures. This is Cameron at 6. the basketball game one day before he got sick having the seizures. This is Cameron in ICU the next day. Now he has cognitive delays. He no longer speaks. The doctor finally said, we don't know what happened, but I would recommend that you never give him a flu shot.
So at 2, 4, and 6 months, Billy had his normal baby vaccines. He was due his MMR vaccination at 12 months. The day Billy got the MMR was a living 9. His eyes were doing this, and he was shaking like this. We get to hospital, we rush him in, doctors are coming in and looking at him, and that's when they said, he's had a reaction. Without a doubt, what's happened to Billy has changed his life. What I have on my hands now is a 19-year-old man. He's 6'2". He is volatile. On good days, Billy is brilliant. He's an angel. On bad days, the slightest thing can trigger him, and he's scary.
Push the stress level, Philly. It's
No, don't touch Ellie.
Otto was born perfectly healthy. He was walking, running, climbing, and hitting every milestone. After his 17-month round of vaccinations, he had an autoimmune reaction. It was vaccine-induced transverse myelitis. One night, he went from being able to walk to no longer being able to stand. He was paralyzed from the waist down. I had no idea my son could be paralyzed from being vaccinated. Transverse myelitis is in the vaccine insert as a potential adverse reaction, but his doctor never showed me that, and he never informed me of any serious side effects.
He was your typical boy. When he was born, he was happy, healthy, everything was flowing perfect. He was walking, talking, all of his well checkups, everything was on time, everything was great. Then he received his chickenpox vaccine, and things really started to deteriorate from there. He was diagnosed with Guillain-Barré and told that it'll be fine, it'll pass in a few days. My happy, healthy baby boy, in a matter of 4 days, went into a near vegetative state of being. The way he described it was that something in the chickenpox vaccine itself counteracted something in his genetics and caused his immune system to turn on itself.
He loved baseball, snow skiing, indoor skydiving. Motocross was his passion. Anything that has to do with an adrenaline rush. The doctor says, hey, he's the age that you should get the HPV vaccine. I said, okay. On day 1, his full neck and his whole right arm was completely paralyzed. My husband took him in to Instacare, holding his head for him because he couldn't get out of bed.
It does suck, like, not being able to play sports anymore. Because I did do a lot of sports.
They say 1 in a million, but I know too many people that have been vaccine injured, and I don't know more than 1 million people.
He was saying mama, and I was so proud that this child said mama first and not dada. We went in, as most parents do, regular vaccinations. When I went to get closer to him to wake him up, I saw that his eyes were partially propped open and he was dead. I knew at that moment what took his life. There was no question what had happened. We went back to the pediatrician. All of her questions were, was your son vaccinated? When did he start having problems? When did the seizures start? It was all around the vaccines. She said, if it's any vaccine that caused these seizures, it's the DTaP. And I said, can you put that in writing? And she said, no.
The Vaxxed and CHD bus tours were not designed as research projects, but the evidence obtained should not be ignored. Every single vaccination on the children's vaccine schedule had reports of serious and permanent injuries, many of them including death.
Okay, thank you. It is a tradition of this subcommittee to swear in witnesses, so if you all rise and raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony you will give before this subcommittee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Please be seated. Our first witness is Miss Emily Tarsell. Ms. Tarsell is a retired psychotherapist and former president of the Licensed Clinical Professional Counselors of Maryland. She's here today to talk about her daughter, Christina. Ms. Tarsell.
Chairman Johnson and committee members, thank you for this important hearing. My name is Emily Tarsell. I'm a retired psychotherapist and a mom. I was blessed with Christina, a healthy, bright child who grew to be a beautiful, caring person, gifted athlete, artist, honor student. In 2008, my 20-year-old daughter had her first GYN appointment. The doctor recommended the HPV vaccine, and we were told it was safe and effective and would prevent cervical cancer. We were not given any literature. We were not told of any adverse side effects. Ads conveyed a sense of urgency about getting Gardasil before exposure to HPVs. So Chris had always gotten the childhood vaccines and agreed to the shots. After vaccination, my daughter developed new conditions: joint pain, chronic sinus congestion, intermittent rashes, rapid heartbeat, dizziness on standing, unusual fatigue, and arrhythmia. We saw doctors, and Chris had an EKG, which came back normal. So we thought everything was okay. We later learned that this was the wrong test and Chris should have had a Holter monitor. No one connected the dots because even doctors are uninformed of vaccine adverse events. She continued with the shots, and 18 days after the third shot, she was found dead in her bed at college. You cannot imagine the hell of seeing your child lifeless. You struggle with the reality. How does a healthy young lady with no pre-existing conditions suddenly die in her bed? An extensive autopsy ruled out drugs, trauma, or organ issues, and cause of death was undetermined. We did not connect Chris's symptoms to vaccination initially until we discovered multiple reports from others too. My doctor advised me to file a VAERS report. I also called the FDA. They did no follow-up with me and took a year to obtain her medical records. They did one test for strep, which was negative. End of their investigation. Conclusion, cause of death undetermined. Merck, the manufacturer, also filed a VAERS report and gave a false and unsubstantiated explanation for Chris's death. Finding out what happened became my mission. I connected with other moms, experts, reporters, and with Diane Harper, the lead investigator during clinical trials for Gardasil. She was critical of the fast-track approval and of the marketing of the vaccine. I learned too late that HPVs clear on their own 90% of the time, and that cervical cancer is almost entirely preventable with Pap screening. I learned that the incidence of HPV-related cancers is very low at 0.001%. I learned it has never been proven that the vaccine prevents any cancer. And I also learned that pharma is protected by law against lawsuits for vaccine injuries. Our only option for investigating Chris's death was to hire an attorney and file a claim in the NVIC program. My super attorney, Mark Sadaka, filed our claim against HHS in March of 2010. Our world-class experts, immunologist Dr. Schoenfeld and cardiologist Dr. Eldar, were prepared to describe at the molecular level how Chris had died from a fatal arrhythmia induced by an autoimmune response to Gardasil, which caused antibodies to attack the calcium channel in her heart. After 8 years of litigation, HHS conceded by preponderance of the evidence that Chris died from her HPV vaccinations. Chris died from a vaccine she never needed, which was falsely advertised to prevent cervical cancer. She was the 23rd of 32 deaths reported in 2009. By 2023, there were 73,366 VAERS reports, including 555 deaths. Only 1% get reported. Additionally, of that 1%, almost 70% of the reports came from Merck, and 9 out of 10 of those reports lack sufficient information for follow-up. And despite this gross underreporting, FDA stated there were 3 times more adverse events reports for Gardasil than all other vaccines combined before COVID. The public has been misled and misinformed about the risks and benefits of the HPV vaccine. And to that end, I am here on behalf of Chris to raise awareness to help others. Our website, GardasilHPVTruths.com, has much documented information, including 90-plus studies. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Tarsell. I would ask all the witnesses to speak right into your microphones there so we can hear you. Next witness is Mr. Eric Stein. He's the Marketing, Communications, and Programs Specialist for Families Fighting Flu. He's here today to talk about his sister, Jessica. Mr. Stein.
Dear Senator Johnson, Senator Blumenthal, and other members of the subcommittee. First, I want to thank you all for having me speak today. Like you said, my name is Eric Stein, and I'm a flu survivor and brother of Jessica Stein. My family lost Jessica to the flu when I was 2 years old and she was 4 years old. I have a photo here of Jessica and I together when we were both alive. We went to preschool together, and in early January of 2002, there was a virus going around our school. Both Jessica and I got sick and missed a couple days of school, but we ultimately both recovered and returned to school like everything was normal. When we came back to school, we were doing everything as normal, going to classes, going to birthday parties, going to hang out with our friends. And my mom now tells me, and she reflects, that Jessica, after this happened, did start to need a nap in the afternoon, which was unnormal for her, but nothing that we were too concerned or alarmed about. In late January, Jessica seemed to relapse. She had mild fever, she was vomiting, she was becoming dehydrated, and after a couple of calls to our pediatrician, they told us to walk, not run, to the hospital and get her checked on. Everything was fine at first, and everything started to move very quickly. A pediatric cardiologist was called in to check on Jessica's heart, and while he said that it was enlarged, but it was beating strongly, and everything was fine. Literally just a few minutes later, Jessica's heart stopped. The room suddenly filled with doctors and nurses, and everybody was doing what they could to restart Jessica's heart. Before my parents even really could comprehend what was happening, Jessica was gone. Still, 20 years later, my parents still struggle to tell the story to me. It haunts them to have to go to the hospital with their daughter and leave without her. To say that Jessica's death changed them, changed all of us, doesn't even begin to tell the depth of the story. I have a younger brother and a younger sister, and they never knew Jessica. My younger sister, Katie, is sitting in the crowd today. Even though they never knew Jessica, she remains a large part of our family. My uncle painted a portrait of her that hangs in our kitchen, and we talk to her, and we talk about what she would have been like and what she would be doing right now if she was still alive today. On her birthday and the day she died, we go to her gravesite as a family. My parents' strength is something that I will always admire. Though I was too young to realize it at the time, they turned their grief into action. In a time before Facebook and social media, they found other families all who had lost a child to flu. They came together, worked hard, and we still work each day to keep this unnecessary tragedy from happening to other families. When Jessica and Emily and Amanda and Alana died, the flu vaccine was not recommended for their age group. Our families changed that. They went to the CDC, they testified in front of the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, which many know now as the ACIP, and it wasn't easy, but ACIP listened. They changed the recommendations to where it stands today, that everyone 6 months and older get an annual flu shot. This is how my family honors Jessica. That's the work that Families Fighting Flu and the organization my parents helped found and that I work for today is all about. No more unnecessary lives lost or impacted due to vaccine-preventable diseases. Through my work with Families Fighting Flu, I've had the benefit of meeting many different families who have all been impacted. And one quick one I want to tell you guys about today. Caden Stevenson from Michigan lost both of his legs when he got the influenza and sepsis crept into his bloodstream. And to save his life, doctors had to amputate both of his legs, which he will live with these disabilities permanently. Thankfully, doctors were able to save his life. I know not everyone shares my views on vaccines, and I have enormous respect for everybody sitting here today coming forward to tell their story. I worry that the misinformation that I hear from my colleagues, my friends, and people my age are pushing us back to a time where vaccines weren't available and when people were dying at large rates from vaccine-preventable diseases. I would like to say that many vaccines are more like a seatbelt. While they might not prevent you from getting the actual disease, they are going to be your best prevention from serious complications from that disease. Deaths like my sister's, like other people from Families Fighting Flu, and serious complications like those from Caden and many other families could have been prevented by vaccines. Other diseases like flu, measles, chickenpox, polio are all seeing a little bit of a rise and dips in vaccine rates. When I think of the lives impacted by flu, I think of my sisters, of course, but also the roughly 27,000 Americans who died just this past year. And that doesn't even count for the 600,000 who were hospitalized due to flu, and some of them suffer permanent complications that they will live with for the rest of their lives. Vaccines save lives and keep people healthy. A vaccine could have saved my sister's life. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stein. Our next witness is Dr. Brian Hooker. Dr. Hooker is the Chief Scientific Officer at Children's Health Defense. He is a doctorate in biochemical engineering. He's here today to talk about his son, Stephen. Dr. Hooker.
Thank you, Senator Johnson. My name is Dr. Brian Hooker. I serve as the Chief Scientific Officer of Children's Health Defense and Emeritus Professor at Biology at Simpson University. My son, Stephen, was born on February 10th, 1998, and was a healthy baby boy. My wife and I made sure he was vaccinated on time per the CDC schedule. I didn't really know what a vaccine adverse event was at the time and thought I was doing the best for my son. Steve was born in the thimerosal era, where most hepatitis B, Hib, and DTaP vaccines distributed in the U.S. contained upwards to 25 micrograms of mercury from the preservative thimerosal. By my son's 15-month well baby checkup, he was exposed to an accumulated total of 237.5 micrograms of mercury, and in 2 of his checkups at 2 and 6 months of age, received a single-day mercury exposure of 62.5 micrograms, which exceeded the current EPA safe exposure limit by nearly 200 times. Prior to his 15-month well baby checkup, Steve had been diagnosed with developmental delays, a chronic ear infections, and upper respiratory infections. We treated these infections with antibiotics and Tylenol as a fever reducer. On the same day as my son's 15-month well baby visit, he was diagnosed with an ear infection by an otolaryngologist. My wife and I still dutifully took Steve to his well baby checkup afterwards, but we questioned the attending nurse practitioner whether he should receive his vaccines while he was sick. The nurse practitioner brushed off our concerns, indicating they didn't have any problems associated with vaccinating sick children. That day, he received the Hib and DTaP vaccines, as well as the oral poliovirus live virus vaccine. This overtaxed his immune system, which was already fighting an ear infection, and he fevered for 18 days after that checkup. The pediatrician told us to treat the fever again with Tylenol. No one at the office mentioned the possibility that my son was having an adverse reaction to his vaccines. After his fever, he very quickly and severely regressed. He stopped talking altogether. He did not respond to his name. He lost all joint attention, would constantly stare into space, and even lost his ability to walk unassisted for the first 3 months following vaccination. His bowel movements were either explosive diarrhea or debilitating constipation. At his 18-month checkup, he was diagnosed with full-blown autism by the same pediatrician who gave him all of his vaccines. Not only does my son have autism, but he has also been diagnosed with mitochondrial dysfunction, tics, speech and language delays, non-organic sleep disorder, sensory integration dysfunction, ileitis, colitis, esophagitis, and whole body dyspraxia. At 27 years old, he still cannot speak. My son was a petitioner in the National Vaccine Injury Compensation Program for 16 years before his case was thrown out by the special master prior to oral arguments. Vaccine courts, with its capricious statute of limitations, would not consider any vaccines prior to his 15-month shots and ruled that he had had autism earlier because he was pulling his ears at 6 months. No one in the DOJ directly opposing my son in court seemed to notice that he was pulling his ears because of recurrent ear infections. My son requires 24/7 care, and his severe dyspraxia means that he is a prisoner in his own body, a body that betrays every time he tries to execute any intentional task, such as eating, talking, walking, grabbing, or grasping any object. He also suffers excruciating chronic pain to gut dysbiosis and neuroinflammation. Nobody wants to see their child go through chronic debilitating pain. My son will never pay taxes. He will never hold a job. He will never play baseball. He will never write a poem. He will never go out on a date. He needs assistance despite his best efforts and despite his best wishes. He needs assistance toileting every time. Society does not want to acknowledge vaccine injury, period. Our story is not welcome in the news media, and social media completely censors us. My family has been gaslighted repeatedly, and my son's medical history has become fodder for astroturfers' blogs, as well as the CDC researchers armchair quarterbacking his vaccine injury case. My son's life has been ruined physically and emotionally, and he is persecuted by the mere fact that he exists. Life is hard, but Jesus Christ is good every day.
Thank you, Dr. Hooker. Our next witness is Dr. Robert Sullivan. Dr. Sullivan is a licensed physician and board-certified anesthesiologist with over 20 years of active practice in Maryland. He is here today to talk about his vaccine injury following his COVID-19 injection. Dr. Sullivan.
Thank you, Senators. My story is not as bad. The same month I received my first COVID mRNA shot, I was featured in the Wall Street Journal's What's Your Workout column for aerial circus arts. I was strong, healthy, and thriving. Just 3 weeks after my second dose, I couldn't go up a flight of stairs without gasping for air. I became short of breath doing even simple things, walking, standing, even speaking. I had constant chest pressure, arrhythmias, and overwhelming fatigue. I cannot overstate the misery. It felt like my body was failing me. I was experiencing right heart failure. Still, I questioned myself. Was this real or in my head? Then an echocardiogram confirmed the damage. I was relieved that it wasn't imagined and stunned to realize this is how I likely die. The diagnosis was pulmonary hypertension. I had damage and narrowing of the blood vessels in my lungs, restricting blood flow and straining the heart. This isn't like regular high blood pressure. Pulmonary hypertension is usually progressive and fatal even with treatment. There is no cure. It felt like a death sentence. I reported my case to VAERS, the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. Most doctors I know had never heard of it. Fewer understood that it carries mandatory reporting requirements. I was never taught about VAERS in medical school. I'm told it still isn't. Eventually, VAERS collected my medical records. I expected to hear from the FDA or CDC. I never did. I believed in the system. I believed I would be heard. When I wasn't, I channeled that disbelief into collaborating with the British Medical Journal on a report about the system's failures. What I learned is chilling. If you are harmed, you are on your own. I've had to adapt. Maybe some of the novel treatments I tried helped. On the outside, I look fine. I returned to running, even to aerial arts. That brings me joy, but also unease. I've lost half my lung capacity. If I can look this normal while carrying that much damage, how many others are out there suffering silently? In researching my condition, I found the Georgetown scientist who predicted my specific problem. The very same month of the vaccine rollout, he warned that spike protein exposure, whether from the virus or from the shot, could harm the blood vessels in the lungs and placenta. Spike protein itself from the SARS-1 virus, SARS-1, also caused vascular damage in animals. I learned many hospitalized COVID patients developed pulmonary hypertension. Autopsies showed the same kind of lung vessel damage I had. Long COVID patients with persistent breathlessness have the same findings. As in my case, their symptoms improve, but the damage remains. We now know the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein can damage the lungs, heart, and brain in animals. It is toxic, irrefutably so. I know that's uncomfortable to hear. One study found athletes who got mRNA boosters saw drops in aerobic capacity equivalent to aging 5 to 10 years in just 1 week. Why is this? I now see colleagues and patients struggling with daily tasks. Many are limited by unexplained shortness of breath. Could this be a spectrum of vascular damage like what happened to me? These are urgent questions. This is not normal aging. This is not simple deconditioning. Until we study this systematically, we won't know how many have been injured by COVID or by the spike protein itself. Our medical system must honor its foundational oath, do no harm. When harm does occur, the right thing is to recognize it, acknowledge suffering, and work to relieve it while advancing research into safer therapies. Government must serve as a safeguard, restoring accountability, transparency, and public trust. And above all, every medical decision must be grounded in truly informed consent. Patients deserve and demand clear, honest information. The freedom to decide what's right for them is a right. Mandatory medicine is not medicine. Acknowledgement matters, being seen, heard, and believed. That is the first and perhaps most important step in healing. To others who have been harmed, I see you. While our injuries differ, I understand the suffering and isolation that comes when the system meant to protect you instead abandons you. I believe you. Senator Johnson and members of the committee, thank you for giving us this opportunity to start to heal.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. Our next witness is Ms. Polly Tommy. Ms. Tommy is the Director of Children's Health Defense TV and is an internationally recognized health freedom advocate, filmmaker, and author. She is here today to talk about her son, Billy. Ms. Tommy.
My son Billy entered the world as a healthy, perfect baby with an APGAR score that reflected his perfection. We followed every wellness check, every vaccination schedule, believing in the system that promised our child safety. For his entire first year, Billy thrived, meeting milestones, crawling, babbling, growing. Yet everything changed at 13 months, the day he received the MMR vaccine, the only one on the schedule back then. That day, I walked into the doctor's office, trusting the advice of professionals who emphasized the importance of vaccinating against deadly diseases like measles. Billy had just finished a round of antibiotics, but the nurse reassured me that the MMR vaccine was essential. Like any diligent parent, I followed these instructions. Hours after the vaccination, Billy's perfect world shattered. He became lethargic, sleeping for long stretches. When my husband came home that afternoon and went to check on him, Billy was convulsing, his tiny body gripped by seizures. We rushed him to hospital, desperate for answers, but the doctors, after hearing he'd had the MMR, said, "It's perfectly normal, it's perfectly common. Lots of children have seizures. He'll be fine. Antibiotics, Tylenol, he'll be fine." But he wasn't fine, and he's still not fine, age 29. He's severely sick with severe autism. We made the movie Vaxxed. to try and understand and warn the world about the real dangers of the MMR vaccine. I even vaccinated my child after I had Billy because I was so pro-vaccine and so into the system. Just the MMR was the problem. But then we got out on the bus. We took a bus and we traveled around America, listening to parents around America, what had happened to them when they vaccinated their children. And what we saw was utterly horrific. We saw so much death following baby vaccines. These parents would vaccinate their perfectly healthy child, and then their child would die. We saw a video at the beginning of this about the whooping cough. I've interviewed so many parents, and one comes to mind, Carrie Bundy's baby. At 4 months old, she pleaded with the doctor, should I vaccinate my child? He's premature. Oh, yes, said the pediatrician. If you don't vaccinate your baby, he could die of whooping cough. She vaccinated that baby, and he was dead in his crib following that. That is the same story we hear over and over again. These childhood vaccinations, the people of America are telling us they are not safe and effective. We are seriously concerned at Children's Health Defense about the disinformation and misinformation out there being told these vaccines are safety trialed. The safety studies are so good. Yet all we see is death and destruction over and over again. Babies, teenagers, HPV Gardasil, their ovaries are shutting down. They cannot have children anymore. The parents are reporting paralysis. Children paralyzed from the waist down. You shout out about polio to us. I have never seen so many crippled children around America. So many children in wheelchairs, unable to walk, talk, speak, on ventilation. Parents are trying to tell their story while putting a feeding tube down their child's to bleed out the lungs, bring out the lungs while they're trying to tell us what has happened. 2 little 2-year-olds who can't hold their heads up because they had one Hep B vaccine. And then you shout out about measles to us. Those 2 girls in Gaines County, they did not die of measles. Children's Health Defense have seen the medical records. We have had experts break down. Yet still, I sit here and I hear over and over again that those 2 girls died of measles. They did not die of measles. And yet, the press and others consistently shout out that vaccines are safe and effective. They are, vaccinate your family. We all vaccinated our families. Everybody sitting here, bar 2, vaccinated their families with catastrophic results. Over 12,000 signatures on those 2 buses of death, death, death. When will enough be enough? How many more buses? How many more children killed? How many more injured adults? And here's a question for you, the senators. Who is going to look after our children when we, the parents, are no longer around? That can't use a toilet, that will never date. All those things Dr. Hooker said. Our children are trapped at 29, 30 years old. They will never pay taxes. They need 24-hour care because of one vaccine, one moment in time. This is a national crisis that must be addressed. And I want to thank Senator Johnson and his team for giving us this day that we thought would never come, that the world could hear really and truly what happened to the people of America who are broken. And this doesn't just affect the person with the injury, by the way. It affects the siblings. It affects the extended family. One of us has to be a carer for life. So this has to stop. And we implore you, please, to follow us at Children's Health Defense, at least break down the truth and get to the truth behind the science of what is really happening. No more Pfizer-sponsored science. We need independent science, and we need our pediatricians to stop getting bonuses for vaccinating our children. So thank you to Senator Johnson and his team.
Thank you, Ms. Tommy. Our next witness is Ms. Cerise Murata. Ms. Murata is the Deputy Chief Executive Officer of Vaccinate Your Family, a national nonprofit. She's here today to talk about her son, Joseph. Ms. Murata.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Cerise Murata, and I am a mother who lost my child to a vaccine-preventable disease. Thank you for allowing me to be here today and share my story. In 2009, my 5-year-old son, Joseph, was a healthy kindergartner. He was a typical little boy who loved Star Wars and Spider-Man. As a family, we enjoyed playing board games and building puzzles. Joseph was smart, funny, and inquisitive. Simply put, he was one of the joys of my life. I was a protective mother, and like other parents, I always tried my best to keep my children safe. To be honest, the thought of losing a child to a vaccine-preventable disease never occurred to me. At the time, I incorrectly thought that these diseases were a thing of the past, until I lost my son Joseph to flu during the H1N1 pandemic in October 2009. This is a picture of Joseph. The H1N1 flu vaccine that could have saved his life was not available in our community until 2 weeks after he died. Joseph was one of 288 children who died during the 2009-2010 flu season, and one of over 2,700 children who have died from flu since 2004. Just this past flu season, 260 children have died from flu, the highest number of pediatric flu deaths we have on record for a non-pandemic year. And that's just flu. Right now, because of declining immunization rates, we have outbreaks of measles and pertussis. Due to mis- and disinformation, lack of access, anti-science sentiment, and other factors, Americans are continuing to die from diseases we have the tools to prevent. Parents continue to bury their children. We know from history what will happen if these trends continue. There is no acceptable loss when it comes to a child. Let me briefly share how my life has changed since losing Joseph. It was incredibly devastating to watch my child die in front of me in an ICU room. It was incredibly hard to go home that morning and tell his 7-year-old sister that her little brother wasn't ever coming home. Let me share what it felt like to walk into the funeral home, holding my daughter's hand and preparing her to see Joseph laying in a small coffin. Let me share how unbearable it was to stand in line at the county clinic to get my daughter her H1N1 vaccine, a vaccine that could possibly have saved Joseph's life. Let me share how incredibly painful it has been for my family each and every day to remember that Joseph will never graduate college, get married, or have a chance to contribute to society. Let me share how my heart breaks over and over and over again because he is no longer here. Now multiply that by thousands of other parents who have lost a child to a vaccine-preventable disease over the years, and the thousands more that are at risk if people don't have access to science-based, factual information about vaccines, vaccine safety, and vaccination services. Sadly, Joseph's story is not unique. I personally know many other parents who have lost their children. Maureen lost her 2-year-old son, JJ, to flu. Katie lost her infant, Callie, to whooping cough. Nicole lost her 10-year-old daughter, Teresa, to COVID-19. There are survivors who had cervical cancer before the HPV vaccine was available. The list goes on. These families are just a few examples of the real impacts of these diseases. According to the CDC, about 4 million deaths worldwide are prevented by childhood vaccinations every year. Vaccines undergo extensive safety testing in clinical trials before they are approved for use, and the U.S. has robust safety monitoring systems to make sure these vaccines continue to be safe and effective following approval. I want to close today by acknowledging that my story and experiences do not in any way minimize those of my fellow witnesses. We are all doing the best we can with the information we have. But I would be remiss if I did not remind the committee that the science is clear. Vaccines are safe and effective. Without these life-saving tools, our families and communities are at risk. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Murata. Our final witness is Ms. Crystal Cordingley. Ms. Cordingley is a published scientist with over 20 years of experience in the medical field. She's here today to talk about her son, Corbin. Ms. Cordingley.
Chairman Johnson, Ranking Member Blumenthal, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to share my story, the story of how our lives were shattered in an instant and the nightmare we now live every day. My name is Crystal Cordingley. I'm a mother of 5, and this is about my son, Corbin D. Cordingley. He was born on September 2nd, 2012, healthy, vibrant, and perfect. He hit all of his milestones early and was a bright, loving, and busy little boy. Our life before his death was full of love, joy, and innocence. I am a scientist and fully believed in the safety and effectiveness of vaccines. I never questioned them. I thought I was protecting my children by following the CDC's vaccination schedule. Corbin received all of his routine vaccines on time, including his 12-month shots 43 days prior to his death. On October 18th, 2013, I took him in for a combo flu shot that would be administered in 2 doses. He seemed fully recovered from a recent cold, and it was a normal day. I fed my kids lunch, prepped dinner, and left for an evening shift at the hospital. That afternoon was the last time I would see my baby alive. At 8:30 p.m., my husband gave the kids a bath and rocked Corbin to sleep. He laid him in his crib, safe and sound. When I came home from work at 11:45 p.m., I went to nurse him. What I found haunts me to this day. My baby, face down. Fists clenched, arms stiff straight to his side, body stiff and unresponsive. I screamed for my husband to call 911 and immediately started CPR. When I opened his mouth, his tongue was stiff with rigor mortis and his lungs gurgled with broken down lung fluid as I tried to breathe life back into him. I knew. The paramedics arrived within minutes, but it was too late. At the hospital, after what felt like a lifetime of trying to revive him, the ER doctor called time of death. My world shattered. How could this happen? He was healthy. Nothing else was different that day, except the flu shot. I repeated it over and over to every medical professional. He got his flu shot this morning, but no one would ever consider it. I was brushed off, told it couldn't have been the vaccine. I was gaslit into believing some babies just die. But no, they don't. Not like this. I held my son's foot in the hospital until it went cold in my hand. Do you know what it's like to hold your lifeless child until their body goes cold? I prayed so hard he'd wake up that I became physically ill. His lung fluid soaked my jacket, and I've never been able to wash it. It's still in his laundry basket, along with all his other dirty clothes, untouched. Days later, I called to cancel his follow-up flu shot and told the pediatrician Corbin had died. Her immediate response was, "I don't believe the shot had anything to do with it." The medical examiner said the same, even after I asked her to send out testing. A month later, she admitted she forgot. When she finally did send tests, none of them had anything to do with determining whether the flu shot played a role in his death. Still searching for answers, we did every genetic test available. Myself, my husband, and our daughter. All clear. 2 years later, I submitted Corbin to a research study. They tested his brainstem and hippocampus. The lead researcher called me personally shocked. She said the damage and scarring she saw was typical in SIDS cases, but Corbin wasn't an infant. He was 13 months old, and he was perfectly healthy. Damage, not defects, not abnormalities, damage to his brain. Despite the pediatrician denying the vaccine's role to my face, I found a note in Corbin's records that she had filed a VAERS report just days after his death. She never told me. The report said, "The parents will not be contacted." She also suggested I continue vaccinating my other children and offered hospital observation after each dose. Why offer observation if vaccines are safe? I was never given informed consent. I was never told about the lack of long-term safety studies. I was never told about the ingredients like polysorbate 80 or the fact that true placebos were never used in many vaccine trials. I was given a simple sheet saying to expect a fever and use Tylenol. I wish someone had warned me. I wish I had been told to research the vaccine inserts, to look deeper, to look at the history, the true history. I wish I had the chance to fight for his life in the hospital, or given any kind of chance. I speak today not only to honor Corbin's memory, but to urge you to ask the hard questions. Parents deserve the truth. We deserve real informed consent, because no parent should have to live the nightmare I do. To all the parents listening, you can never unvaccinate, but you can wait. Wait until it's truly proven safe. One shot, one decision, one moment. That's all it takes to shatter a family forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cordingley. I want to thank all the witnesses. I know telling your stories is not easy. I think I speak for everybody in this room, committee members. Our sincere condolences for your losses, for the tragedies that have really impacted your life. The divide here is wide. I don't doubt any of these stories. I don't. Where are vaccines useful? Where have they prevented death and disease? My guess is they have. But I also know that vaccine injuries are real, as I said at the onset, and they've been ignored. From both sides, we've heard misinformation. I mean, it's a weaponized word. Dr. Hooker, you've probably done as much, if not more, research into this area as anybody. Can you just comment on anything you've heard? Again, I don't want to make this contentious. I mean, you've all suffered horrible loss and tragedy, but this is a discussion. This is a debate. These are truths we have to seek out. So, Dr. Hooker, can you just? I mean, I'm just going to let you comment on things that may have struck you that you want to comment on.
You know, we've heard over and over and over again industry canards and, you know, things that are cringeworthy to me as a parent and as a scientist. The preponderance of evidence around vaccines and autism basically in the United States consists of two studies that were done by a flawed and fraudulent CDC, one on thimerosal-containing vaccines and one on the MMR vaccine. Clearly, in the MMR study, when you look at the table, it shows a statistically significant effect of the MMR when given on time. 67% more boys getting the vaccine on time get autism diagnosis than those that merely wait until 3 years of age. Now, I had a whistleblower come forward to me to tell this information, Dr. William Thompson, in 2013 and 2014. We also know that the Verstraeten study in 2003 is also flawed, fraught with errors, and fraudulent, accusing them of directly cherry-picking information from the vaccine safety data link because of issues with clinics. Now, there is a hole in the science around vaccines and autism that you can drive a Mack truck through. You can't just look at one vaccine and one component and then wave your pixie dust and say they're safe. That is just not a fact, and that is just not how science works.
Dr. Herc, you mentioned Bill Thompson, and he was featured in the first movie, Vaxxed. Can you tell the story about that particular MMR study that I think identified a link between autism and MMR in black young men, right?
That is correct.
Tell about the story about the CDC officials that gathered with their data, and was it a shredder? Tell about the story of them coming together and destroying the evidence, but Dr. Thompson did not do so.
Dr. Thompson did not do so.
Tell the story, though.
I will, yes. The CDC scientist who was the lead epidemiologist on this MMR study was Dr. William Thompson. He came forward to me in 2013 through a series of phone calls, and we were in close contact for 10 months. What happened was he found the African-American effect, that African-Americans were over 200% more likely, and African-American males over 300% more likely to get an autism diagnosis if they got the MMR vaccine on time versus if they were received the vaccine after 3 years of age. And when they got that evidence, when they got that information, they were told directly by the supervisors on the study, the same supervisors who were the co-authors of the Agent Orange.
Oh, wait, go ahead and name names.
Yes, Dr. Colleen Boyle and Dr. Frank DiStefano, they were ordered directly to destroy evidence and destroy federal records in violation of the Federal Records Act as amended in September of 2002. That information was destroyed. Dr. Thompson shared that information with me directly. I repeated the analysis, did the exact same analysis, and I got the exact same result. African-American males, when they get the MMR on time, are 3.5 times more likely to get an autism diagnosis than if you wait simply until after 3 years.
So that would show a link. And again, I think
that is correct.
The important part of this story is not only that, but the fact that you had federal health agency officials destroy evidence of that fact. They gathered everybody in office, right? And they literally all brought the evidence and they destroyed it together, except for Dr. Thompson. He kept the evidence, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Ms. Tarsal, as I said in the opening statement, Dr. Joel Walscock talked about just being abandoned. Can you talk about your experience following your daughter's tragedy?
There was total disbelief in what happened. I was home alone when a police officer came to my house to tell me they found my daughter dead in her bed and they didn't know what happened. It took quite a while for us to begin to put the pieces together. And I understand from the other panelists here that initially one would never suspect it was vaccine related because we've been told they're safe and effective and prevent whatever it is they're designed to prevent. When that first became evident that other people, at the time Gardasil had only been licensed 2 years before, so at the time there was little literature known online, but I began to connect with other parents and moms and researchers online. It's like, there's a whole lot that we're not being told. And that's devastating to not be informed, and as I learned more about it, that we were never told. My daughter never needed that vaccine. She was never at risk of getting cervical cancer. The risk is very low. the HPV is clear on their own. And I'm not the only mom who's gone through that experience, and now they're also pushing it for boys, when they haven't even been able to show that the vaccine causes any cancer that's HPV related. And there's a whole reason for that, because these cancers are very slow growing, and the onset is after age 50. So they're giving it to young adolescents. It was like, I just was blown away. I could not imagine that they would have approved these vaccines and they would continue to do so. And to have Merck lie on their report. The other thing that's come up here in these conversations is people talking about the VAERS reports. That's the first line to determine if there are red flags for injuries after vaccination. And that is a very, very flawed system. I had no idea at the time. But I have learned that, as I said in my talk, that less than 1% get reported. One of the doctors on the panel said he never learned about it in medical school, and they still don't. And how can this be? This is crazy. This is the front line to determine if there are vaccine injuries. And so I've been, I feel my daughter is here with me. I'm her voice. I am trying to make her death matter. I know of all these other moms who have lost their kids through various vaccines, but HPV vaccine in particular. There were 6 other mothers I was connected with back in 2008 who had lost their daughters. Thank God I had support and the ability to find out more. And that's why I'm here. I want to share it with other people. We all want the best for our kids.
Okay, thank you. Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you very much. And I want to agree with the chairman that we have an obligation to be constructive and understand and respect the losses that have occurred here. There's nothing antagonistic about the emotion that I feel, and I respect not just the losses, but the urgings for reform that have come from our witnesses and probably others in the audience who've suffered those losses. I'm a lawyer, prosecutor for most of my life. Destruction of documents is absolutely abhorrent. It should be investigated and pursued, condemned, if there has been destruction of any documents. I think we can all agree on that point. We have a system, and it dates from, I think, around 40 or 50 years ago, the National Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. Dr. Hooker, I think you made reference to it. It provides legal immunity, a shield for manufacturers. Now, I am extremely suspicious as a lawyer of immunity that is granted in any blanket way across the board to any manufacturer or to anyone, whether it is any industry. And I would be interested to know whether others among our witnesses here today have sought to pursue claims under that program, I understand you did, Dr. Hooker, correct?
That is correct, Senator.
For some 16 years.
16 years, that's correct.
And you got no relief.
We had absolutely no relief whatsoever. Neither were we allowed oral arguments.
So maybe we ought to look at this system. You know,
agreed.
I am not suggesting what should be done about it. I don't know whether you have legislation, Mr. Chairman, on this program.
We're still in the exploratory phase here.
Okay. So, you know, I'm a lawyer. I'm very result-oriented. And I am heartbroken to hear these stories. And it makes me want to do something. So, I'm not promising anything. So you might want to hold your applause.
How about we ban pharmaceutical ads on TV? I'll co-sponsor that bill.
I've advocated it, and you have a co-sponsor. Remember that I'm the state attorney general who helped to lead the lawsuit against big tobacco when that industry denied that smoking caused cancer or any other disease. In fact, some tobacco manufacturers actually advertised that it was good for you to smoke. And they knew at the time, talk about destruction of records, that tobacco addiction, nicotine addiction, and smoking caused cancer. They knew it from their own experiments. They hid it, and then they actually destroyed records. And that is one of the reasons why we won that set of lawsuits. When people said no one could ever win, that in effect, they were immune. I don't really think any industry should be immune from legal responsibility. And I'm not going to go into the other industries because I don't want to muddy the waters here. But I would be interested in looking at whether reforms are appropriate and whether, for example, the injury table ought to include other kinds of problems that allegedly are caused, and I use the word allegedly as a lawyer, by problems with vaccines. I am not a scientist. And so I really can't leap to any sort of conclusions here. And that's why in courtrooms we have expert testimony. And lawyers are reprimanded if they testify. So I'm not doing it here. But I do think that we need to be responsible in the way we talk about this issue, not to belittle any claims on one side or the other. And I just want to ask you, Ms. Murata, whether you have talked to families or individuals who've been affected by measles, whether you have found they've been discouraged from using the vaccine, and what you advise them to do.
Thank you for your question, Senator Blumenthal. So at Vaccinate Your Family, we do work with patient advocates that have been impacted like mine, like my story. One particular measles story comes to top of mind for me. His name is Joshua. At the age of 30, he caught measles. He thought he had been vaccinated. He had asked his mother when he got sick, "Hey, Mom, was I vaccinated?" And he found out that he wasn't. He caught measles at his sister's college graduation and ended up in the hospital. Thankfully, he survived, but he had a really long road to recovery. So what we're seeing right now with outbreaks of measles is obviously very concerning to me as a parent. You know, we again want people to have the right information about how they can protect themselves and their families. I don't know personally of any story where someone was discouraged from reporting an injury, so I can't speak to that.
Thank you. My time has expired. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Marino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for putting on this hearing. And, you know, a father of 5, 3 grandkids. In fact, my daughter's visiting me today and last night in D.C. Normally, I get an alarm clock, but this morning I got a cute little 18-month-old face in front of me to wake me up. So to all of you, I can't even, you know, you say that you can relate. I can't. I can't even imagine what you're going through, and we have to figure out a way forward. So let me just, I think it's important, though, that we look at where we were to understand what we need to do to go forward. So I think most Americans expect that when you get on a plane, you buy a car, you get on an elevator, you eat a meal, that there's a standard of care that that company used. And if they didn't use a standard of care, that you have a path to get some sort of compensation for the lack of effort. I think most of us kind of expect that. So when we say anything is safe, there's nothing that's 100% safe, impossible. But what's interesting about this industry is that the government has decided that this particular industry gets a free pass. That this particular industry doesn't have to be liable to anybody. And to our ranking member, I'm glad that you're interested in these things. I think that's fantastic. But President Biden or the auto pen extended immunity for these pharmaceutical companies for 5 years on the way out the door. How does that happen? On December 11th, 2024, with no public notice, snap of an auto pen, liability is extended through 2029. So you look at it, you go, well, how does all this happen? And I think we also have to recognize that there was a lot of people who, for example, I'm sure for you, Dr. Sullivan, for you, Dr. Hooker, for many of you, when you even said, hey, is this a problem? You were banned on social media. Well, okay, let's say that's not the worst thing that can happen to you in the world. But then the Biden administration then took it further and said, you can't go to work and make a living because your employer must either force you to be vaccinated, force you to reveal your public medical information, or you're unable to provide for your family. That's a very different thing, and yet complete silence. And so if we're going to go forward, I think we have to acknowledge where we were in the past, because what happened during those years was something that this country's never seen, a slide towards a government that's supposed to derive its power from the consent of the governed, was terminating people, working with social media companies that says, you know, if Ms. Tommy, if you put this post on, you can put a post that says, I think Senator Marino's tie is ugly. Totally fine. This was the FBI knocks on your door. You're deleted from social media. The White House was bringing tech companies to the White House saying, hey, we're going to work together to squash any dissent. This goes far beyond an informed decision that a parent has to make. It's tough, by the way. I tell my kids this all the time, my 2 daughters that have kids, being a mom or dad is hard. You have to make decisions for another human being. But where's the relationship with the government saying this is what you will do? And if you don't do these things, there's going to be severe consequences. So I'm all for going forward, but there has to be humility of looking backwards over the period of time in COVID and realize that our government did real damage to real people, from closing schools to forced vaccinations to the shunning, public shaming of people. So to my Democrat colleagues, I just, look, I get it. I was a private citizen up until 6 months ago. But what motivated me to come here to Washington, D.C. to serve this country was because our government lost its ever-living mind over the last 4 or 5 years. So on a go-forward basis, there's some obvious things. Why don't we treat the pharmaceutical industry like any other business? You make a car that kills somebody, you're liable. Now, by the way, as a former car dealer, driving a car safe, okay? But will a car have an accident? Of course. Flying is the safest thing you can do. But are there accidents? Of course. But why are we exempting certain industries? And of course, then you start thinking, well, what's the money that goes into it? When you go to make a decision for your child, is a doctor actually being a fair arbiter? Or are they thinking, hey, there's a pharmaceutical rep that's going to pay me based on how many vaccines I prescribed, how many prescriptions I fill? That's a whole different world. And we've seen it not just on vaccines, but, you know, in the family that controlled Purdue Pharma, they're on a beach somewhere, and they're billionaires. And they left tens of thousands of people in my state, in Ohio, dead. Where's the justice for those people? So if we're going to do this, Mr. Chairman, to our ranking member, we need to get serious about understanding that there's a lot of entanglements between special interest groups, lobbyists, with zero accountability. Because finding Purdue Pharma did nothing for the Sackler family. Sackler family are still living a great life. And the people who profited severely from the COVID-19 vaccine are living a great life. They're not sitting here like all of you having a different conversation. So if we're going to do something, the North Star has got to be medical freedom. I get to decide. I get to decide what's good for me and my family with proper information. And if I'm given improper information, just like in any other industry, there's got to be accountability. And these industries that produce bad behavior, the executives, the people who charge those people to do these bad things have got to feel personal repercussions. Because if that's not the guidepost in which we do this, then all we're going to do is have wasted these great people's time. So I'll end where I started. I'm hoping that, Chairman, what comes out of this is actual progress. Because when I hear your stories, it breaks my heart, and I know it's a death sentence it's a life sentence for all of you. This isn't something where tomorrow you snap your fingers and your emotions leave you. It's going to be with you, and I can see the pain in each and every one of you. And I'm hoping my colleagues see that pain and that we actually move the ball forward to get something done. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Marino. So Ms. Tommy, when I'm watching the video and I watch the one mom whose child died of SIDS, describing her SIDS support group, and every parent was talking about the vaccine. And my guess is none of their doctors talked about a vaccine. They just called it SIDS. When the other woman, the last woman whose child died, and the doctor was asking about the vaccines, when she asked the doctor, would you put that in writing? The doctor said, no. In your testimony, you said when you went to your doctor talking about how Billy was having seizures, well, that's perfectly normal. That's common. I mean, I find that jaw-dropping.
Yeah, and it's the same story over and over again. And in fact, it is common.
That's what I want to ask you.
Because it's on the insert of the MMR vaccination, on the insert in bold letters, the seizure, so it is common. The pharmaceutical company have told us in the insert. It's the pediatricians that don't tell us what could happen to our children. They're the front line for us with our babies, and we trust them.
By the way, what is the truth? Because I hear back and forth. I mean, do pediatricians get incentivized with percent vaccination of their...
Yes, Dr. Paul Thomas has done a very good video on that, and many other pediatricians have followed. Maybe Dr. Hooker could answer better on that.
Yeah, they're typically incentivized directly by HMOs. HMOs buy and sell vaccines, so vaccines are big businesses for HMOs. but the incentivization is usually anywhere from $200 to $600 per fully vaccinated patient, as long as their vaccines, a certain percentage of their practice is fully vaccinated. So some pediatricians can make upwards to $1 million or more a year just in those incentives.
I've also heard stories of pediatricians basically firing patients because they won't get vaccinated, because
that is correct.
We hear that story over and over again. And also the lies that the pediatrician tell us that our baby will die if we don't get vitamin K at birth. The baby will bleed out before it gets to the car. And these stories, if you don't get the HPV vaccine, then you will die of cancer. These parents have told us these stories, and they're the same over and over again. How can they get away with lying like that to us, the parents?
So we have a doctor on the panel, Dr. Sullivan. Outside of your testimony in terms of your own COVID injection, and I call it injection because it's not a vaccine, your own injury, can you enlighten us in terms of the attitude of most doctors when it comes to vaccines, what kind of training, what kind of information they have? And by the way, do you also find it jaw-dropping that a pediatrician would tell a mom when their baby's having seizures, oh, that's perfectly normal after vaccine?
I agree that is jaw-dropping. The training for vaccines now is limited to memorizing the schedule. In the preparation for this testimony, I reviewed my historical textbooks about vaccination chapters. And Senator Blumenthal, I want to commend you for really an excellent summary as an attorney about the history of vaccines. I'm actually very enthusiastic about vaccination. Your story about the history of the deaths of smallpox, the lives saved, is convincing.
I don't think, I'm not sure I follow your comment.
Well, you gave a summary. So the history of vaccines. So I'm actually, it may surprise you, I'm enthusiastic about vaccination. So when we look at the history of vaccination, smallpox was so successful that it's not even on the schedule anymore. It was a success. Then followed vaccinations to bacterial toxoids. That's the DTP vaccines. And then there was vaccination to viruses, MMR. And you talk about polio. That was a great fear in my mother's time. And we know, and I haven't seen these cases. I've seen maybe 2 cases of pertussis in my career, and I read about measles. I've never seen it. I wouldn't recognize these things. So we know from experience it's successful. What we're missing, though, and this is not taught in medical school, is there's a cost to this success. There's a cost of manufacturing the medicine and the research. There's a cost to administer it. And there's the hidden cost of injuries, and we do not know what that is. It is not studied. It's not taught. Senator Johnson, does that answer your question?
Sort of.
Okay.
Sort of.
Well, I want to be clear, too, and I'm not vaccine injured. I'm injured by an mRNA therapeutic. I was very careful in my testimony to use the word shot.
So while I have you, because again, I was warned early on because I was talking to people highly skeptical of the mRNA.
Mm-hmm.
One doctor beside himself, understanding what his colleagues were going to do, inject something into the human body that would turn the human cell into a manufacturing site for something that's toxic to its body. It's like, gee, what could go wrong?
Yes.
Encapsulated in a lipid nanoparticle designed to permeate difficult to permeate barriers like the blood-brain, like the placenta. You knew it wasn't. They knew it wouldn't. They knew it didn't stay in the arm, and yet they lied to us.
Oh, they lied to us. That was not told at the time.
So again, I would say that a doctor telling Ms. Tommy that a seizure after a vaccination is perfectly normal.
No, it isn't.
That's a lie.
Yes.
I mean, it's a jaw-dropping lie. But talk about the spike protein, because what we're hearing now is what I'm seeing is everybody, it's all being blamed on long COVID. The brain fog, it's all about long COVID. No, once again, complete state of denial. Well, the nasty part of the coronavirus is the spike protein.
Yes.
That is the antigen that the mRNA injection caused the body to produce.
Yes, it's a biologically active
duh.
molecule.
So maybe it's the vaccine that's causing the brain fog, the neurological injuries, and the death, and the strokes, and I can't remember what it's called, the lining inside your your blood vessels. I mean, that's, I think, your problem, right?
Vasculitis, yes.
Yeah.
Inflammation of vessels.
So talk a little bit about what you found out now that you've done your research in terms of the spike protein. And when you've got, at least in the virus, it hopefully would clear, but with the mRNA, it's not real mRNA, it's modified. It's modified to not be destroyed by the body, to keep circulating. Now we have studies that the mRNA, that modified mRNA, it's circulating in the body for months. We haven't done that in much studies to find out how long, but we're finding it in tumors, we're finding it in other autopsy body parts, that type of thing. Can you just talk about that, and then we'll turn it back over to Senator Blumenthal.
You're correct. There are many ways to lose with this new mRNA technology. There are problems with lipid nanoparticle. There is a separate set of problems with synthetic mRNA. It persists in some people 700 days and counting now. There will always be a problem when you load the instructions to make a protein in that it will present on the surface of the cell and will become a setup for autoimmune disorders. Separate from that, spike protein in and of itself is biologically active. And to understand what happened to my injury, I found researchers who had predicted this was going to happen. It causes cells to grow and divide when they should not. It was published in December 2020, although not widely known, that was causing damage to placenta and to lung. I was probably one of the very few doctors that knew that that shot did not stay in the arm, and I don't even know how I found that information, but I would say that was virtually unknown, and later I found this out to be true. I only found out spike protein was toxic later when I met the researchers, and I asked, how did you think to research that? Because they knew in 2005 with SARS-1 that spike protein alone, without the virus, would be enough to harm an animal. Later, in the research of the original novel bat human coronavirus, this is the 2015 research at UNC with Dr. Ralph Barrick, NIH, and Wuhan Labs. That was the gain of function research, and so they had a SARS virus that became more lethal, more transmissible. They attempted to do a vaccine for that trial. That was a traditional vaccine, not mRNA. They had vaccine-induced harm and lethality in the animals, and in the pathology slides of those animals, this is mice, you can see the same vascular lung damage that we're seeing today with SARS-2.
So they knew all of this. They
Yes.
knew this.
Yes.
They knew this.
Yes.
And
This
if
was
they
knowable.
lied to us, they rolled this out, billions were made, they called it safe and effective, they mandated it, and they knew this.
That is correct, Senator.
Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you. In closing, I just want to say I appreciate all the witnesses being here today. My opening statement, I think, still stands. Vaccines for smallpox, polio, measles, whooping cough have all saved lives, and they've been proven safe and effective. If you have criticisms of the clinical trials or the studies, I'd be interested in hearing or seeing them, but the people of America should know that the safe and effective standard of the FDA means something, and that the perils of failing to help your children and protect them with these vaccines can be very great. Just in defense of doctors, I don't think I need to defend them, but according to the American Academy of Pediatrics, most doctors lose money on administering vaccines. They do it because they believe it has public health benefits. That's what the American Pediatric Academy says. I hope that we can work together on measures that will prevent misrepresentation in any sort of ads, and the ads that appear for a lot of pharmaceutical drugs. I think encouraging people to use drugs that may not be appropriate for them certainly ought to be scrutinized, and we ought to take action, and I'd be interested in joining the chairman in exploring that issue. And I invite him as well to join me in other kinds of reform measures applied to big pharma. As a senator, I've sponsored at least half a dozen bills to stop pharmaceutical drug companies from putting profits over people, including the Smart Prices Act, to expand Medicare negotiations, the Prescription Drug Relief Act, and Lower Drug Costs for Families Act. I was the first Attorney General to take action against Purdue Pharma, even though that company is headquartered in Stamford, Connecticut. We were the first. Unfortunately, the FDA failed to take the kind of action it should have taken. I am by no means a booster without criticism of the FDA. But I think we owe it to the parents of America and the people of America to recognize the importance of vaccines as public health measures, because the failure to vaccinate can have implications and impacts beyond your personal choices. The fact is that the largest vaccine manufacturers do contribute, and they contribute to one party predominantly rather than another. We're not going to get into politics here, but since it's been raised as an issue, I invite you to look at some of the data. And I want to say also that supporting vaccination doesn't mean that somehow you've looked the other way. It means you're paying attention. Again, not to dismiss the kinds of losses that have been suffered here. And if we're talking about immunity from lawsuit, you know the other industry that has blanket immunity? It's the gun industry. The gun industry. So if we're going to get up on a soapbox, talk about how manufacturers should be held responsible, maybe we want to have a look at my legislation that would repeal the PLACA immunity that's now enjoyed by the gun industry. And I would welcome others to join me in my legislation against some of these abuses by big pharma, including the patent thickening kinds of legislation that would take action against manufacturers and companies that make it more difficult for lower cost generics to come to market. This is a complicated area. Anyone who's been involved in trying to reform it has looked at the power of big pharma and seen it and felt it. So I invite anyone who wants to join me in standing up to it in action, not just in word. And again, my thanks, Mr. Chairman. I have to go to another commitment at 5 o'clock, and we have a vote at 5:30, so
Okay.
We're coming to the close.
Well, I appreciate your participation. I've got a lot more questions, so thanks for attending. Dr. Hooker, can you talk a
Yes,
little bit
sir.
about, because I know Bobby Kennedy asked Fauci one time, who claimed that the vaccines had been tested against placebos, and Fauci made a big show of looking through all these documents, so I guess I didn't bring that particular study. Can you talk about whether or not any of the vaccines on the childhood schedule have ever been tested against a true placebo?
In terms of FDA trials, in the Center for Biologics Evaluations and Research under the FDA, there has never been a clinical trial on a childhood vaccine that has had a true saline placebo. The only saline placebos that were done were on the COVID-19 shots, and those placebos basically were essentially null and void because they started to offer the vaccine itself to the control group within 10 to 14 weeks of the start of the trial. So no, there are no placebo-controlled trials that use a true saline placebo.
In previous hearings and events, talking to Aaron Seary, he really does lay out a pretty shocking, a bunch of facts in terms of the very small period of some of these trials and some of these vaccines. Can you comment on that?
Yes. If you look at the clinical trials that were done, say, for example, by the hepatitis B vaccine, some of the clinical trials looked at adverse events after the vaccine in a duration of 48 hours. Some of the vaccines regarding the Haemophilus influenza B and the DTaP vaccine, the window for adverse events was 4 days or 5 days. And so we know that many serious adverse events obviously happen after that window. So these serious adverse events within 48 hours, 4 days or 5 days, they would not be recorded and they would be completely opaque from the public and from the FDA.
So for the COVID trials, they basically inoculated, they injected the placebo group, so we don't have a control group anymore.
No, we have no long-term
So we have no
studies.
data, and even there, it sounded like they doctored the trial data. They delayed reporting some of the deaths. There were actually more deaths in the injection arm of the trial versus the placebo arm. Is that correct, Dr. Sullivan? You're shaking your head?
That is completely correct. And I only learned that later, maybe a year after, but there were more deaths in the treatment group than the placebo group.
That wasn't exactly publicized in the corporate media.
No.
I wouldn't call a trial that lasted 48 hours or 4 days an extensive test. Would you, Dr. Hooker?
Not at all.
The VAERS system, what was it? It was a Harvard study conducted, correct? That showed
yes.
what, 1%? I guess they estimated about 1% of all vaccine injuries are actually reported to VAERS?
That is correct, about 1%. This was you're referring to a study by Ross Lazarus et al. From the Harvard Pilgrim Medical Group. It was a study actually sponsored by the CDC themselves, and they estimated that about 1% or less of all vaccine adverse events were being captured by VAERS.
So what do you estimate the rate of vaccine injury? You've done a lot of studying on this?
Absolutely, and I think going back to that same publication, again, it's CDC dollars, and they found that in their study group, they looked at the Harvard Pilgrim HMO over 3 years, and they looked at every individual needle stick, and they found that there were, for every 39 needle sticks, there was one serious adverse event. So that's 1 in 39. It's not 1 in a million. It's not 1 in 2 million. It's 1 in 39 needle sticks. Now, when you factor in the fact that over that 3-year period, many people got more than one vaccine, then the serious adverse event rate per person was 1 in 10.
So I would re-recommend the Substack from Toby Rogers titled Mapping the Entire Field of Autism Causation Studies in One Article. It was very eye-opening for me. I know this is the most toxic subject, autism and vaccines. But it's true. I mean, when I was growing up, I'm 70 years old now, I'd never even heard the word autism. And I know you can probably doctor statistics, you can kind of doctor charts. I'm actually pretty good at charts. But the charts you see, incidence of autism seem to really escalate after 1986 with the explosion of vaccines. So again, does it prove causation? No, but man, it is a correlation that ought not to be ignored. And when you read that Substack by Toby Rogers, you realize this has not only been ignored, but design all these studies, spend billions of dollars to find the genetic component causing autism, don't find it, but you don't separate your study subjects between the vaxxed and the unvaxxed. Can somebody comment just in terms of what we found with the Amish population?
Yes, sir. The Amish population, there was a whole group of studies called of articles that were done by an AP reporter, Dan Olmsted, and he found that the only autism that he saw in Amish subjects were those children who were adopted by Amish families who had been previously vaccinated.
Again, an interesting correlation, huh? Dr. Sullivan, I really would recommend you read Dissolving Illusions, Turtles All the Way Down. I think the main point made in those books is that improved sanitation dramatically eradicated a lot of these childhood diseases before vaccine has ever hit the stage. Again, that doesn't mean that vaccines didn't eradicate the tail end of that. But
I'm in agreement. I'm completely aware of that. And it's a very complex subject. And I should clarify, I'm enthusiastic about vaccination that works.
But how do you say, again, because
well, we don't know. We don't know.
That's the point.
I think Senator Blumenthal's point
describe
was,
that though. Describe why we don't know.
So, I think to back up, we're referring to there's a social benefit to vaccination. It's hard to define. It's the herd immunity. We all benefit from less disease in society, but we haven't looked at that there is a cost to doing that, and that is going to be harms, and those harms have not been systematically investigated or tabulated. So that's the first point. And then, as I would say that success has led to excess, and so the low-hanging fruit, the success has been in the older diseases. And then with influenza, I think it's an excellent topic where there are other ways to treat influenza. You can treat it with antivirals. And what is worrisome to me is that the flu vaccine, at best, was 60% effective. We've been trying this since the 1930s. What does that mean, 60% effective? There are 1 or 2% of the population gets serious flu once a year, or that's about it. A 60% effectiveness implies you have to give about 70 shots to prevent one flu case. And we look at it in medical populations. It doesn't save hospitalizations or days off from work. Worrisomely, is each year that effectiveness seems to be decreasing. It was down to 20%, and last year it became negative. There was negative efficacy of 27% with the flu shot, implying that perhaps 1 in 4 cases were actually caused by the intervention. And we all want to prevent deaths from flu. I've had the flu. I will do a lot to avoid it. But there are other ways to do this.
So I got sucked into this whole conversation as Chairman of Homeland Security when during COVID, I was holding hearings on early treatment. We didn't have a vaccine then. Again, I was hearing about what they were talking about, and it kind of concerned me. So, why aren't we exploring all these existing drugs, generic, they're cheap, they've been proven, pretty safe. Again, no drug is totally safe, and we completely blew it off. So again, I personally, I would like to see the medical establishment, I'd like to see our federal health agencies devote a lot of time and effort into treating disease as opposed to funneling all this money into, again, the almost religious belief in the efficacy of vaccines. I will enter into the record, because I had my staff check it out. For the last 20 years, the average efficacy of the flu vaccine is 40%.
That sounds correct.
I didn't see the negative efficacy, but I did
that's
see...
from a Cleveland Clinic last year. That's a study on 50,000 of their employees. That may be a preprint study, but that is worrisome for this coming flu season.
I mean, we did see studies that negative efficacy for the COVID injection as well.
Yes,
again,
we did.
All that kind of information was dismissed. What I would like to give all the witnesses an opportunity, just if something you didn't say or something somebody else said that you want to comment, I'm happy to have that. Have you do that. We'll start with Ms. Tarsell, please.
Yes, thank you. As a follow-up to a discussion about VAERS and to what you asked me about what I learned after my daughter died, I was stunned that the FDA did not follow up, that there's no real investigation. I was stunned that on the CDC website, they said deaths have been investigated and have been found to due to other causes. When I knew not only my daughter's death, but other deaths had not been investigated or found to be due to other causes. And through a FOIA request, I got all reports about that VAERS reports on my daughter's case, Merck, the manufacturer, had filed a report claiming my daughter died from a viral infection. There was no evidence that she had died of a viral infection. I spent a year communicating with Merck. Why did they say that? What's their evidence? They said my doctors told them that. So I went to my doctors. I got letters from the doctors stating that no one, neither they nor anyone on their staff, had ever reported that my daughter died from a viral infection. Yet, Merck has that not only in the VAERS report, but on a system called the Worldwide Adverse Event System that is available to doctors. And I guess doctors look at that to get an update on vaccine injuries or concerns. And once it's dead there, they never remove it, even if it's inaccurate information. So I think that's another area in terms of what information is available from authorities, what information is available to doctors from the manufacturer, and what information we get from informed consent. Very big areas that need to be investigated. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Stein.
Thank you again, Senator Johnson, for letting me speak. I wanted to thank everybody again who's at this table sharing their experiences. I know it's really tough to do, and I don't want anything that no loss should ever happen, and it's a very sad thing. And I feel for you guys. I feel for everybody at this table who has suffered that. And I just want to make a point about the influenza antivirals. We know that antivirals need to be prescribed very quickly once people are diagnosed with flu, and that oftentimes antivirals are not effective after the first 24 hours that people feel symptoms. So, we have to think about the fact that, yes, we want to be able to treat and make sure everybody is healthy, but we also have to think about the logistics of this as well, in addition to just saying, it's easy to say, well, everybody should be able to get treated and everybody should be fine afterwards, but we have to think about the logistics and the reality that is not all antivirals are going to be super effective, and not all flu treatment and all vaccine preventable disease treatments are going to be 100% effective all the time.
I understand. That's why I want to put more effort into researching for treatment. Dr. Hooker.
Thank you, Senator Johnson. As a parent of a vaccine-injured child, I've been to D.C. many, many times. I cannot travel with a vaccine-injured son to the extent that obviously it needs to happen. I am competing against a pharmaceutical lobby of 1,600 lobbyists. That's 3 lobbyists for each member of Congress, and millions of dollars that are being exchanged into campaign coffers, into C4s. This is insane. It cannot continue on. And the individuals, and I'm so thankful for you. I'm so thankful for being recognized as a parent of a vaccine-injured child who spends anywhere from $25,000 to $50,000 a year out of pocket, unreimbursable medical for having this particular voice. But really, one of the things that has always been very, very difficult and very, very discouraging is coming up against the big pharma lobby, which is almost 3 times bigger than the next biggest competitor.
No, you're outgunned. And again, I was actually very pleased to hear Senator Blumenthal with an open mind toward what we need to do with that compensation fund for both normal vaccines as well as the COVID injection fund is a joke. I mean, it's awful. And,
absolutely.
Okay. Dr. Sullivan.
2 points with VAERS, and I know you like charts. If we were to go to 2019 and I were to show you a chart of the adverse event reports to VAERS, there were about 20,000 reports for all vaccines, including flu vaccines. In 2021, 2022, if I made that chart a foot high so you could see it from there.
We had it in the last hearing.
Oh,
so
did you?
Yeah.
It would go 50 feet high. I mean, it literally went from 20,000 to over 1 million. The other key point about VAERS, and we've talked about the underreporting factor of at least 40, maybe 100, we don't know for sure. It is reactive, no, it's not proactive, and it absolutely will not catch a novel complication. I cannot state that strongly enough. It will miss any novel complications. We have a novel gene therapy, a novel therapeutic, a novel virus, and we have novel complications. Thank you.
Just a quick comment. I think part of the problem it doesn't catch these things is they don't want to find them. Okay? They don't want to know the truth. I mean, that's a real problem. Ms. Tommy.
First of all, thank you again for today and listening to us. I just want to reiterate the paediatricians being paid to, or getting bonuses, certainly for vaccinating our children. They are our first line as we go in with our precious babies. And many of these young parents, they look at them for the research. When it says do your own research, that's where they go. So if you want Children's Health Centre to do some more research on that to get you the truth about the bonuses, we really need to look into that. Because that's, again, is what I think is killing a lot of these babies and children, is the pediatricians and their advice, their lies.
Well, to me, that's just a huge conflict of interest.
Exactly.
It just is. Ms. Murata.
Again, thank you for having me here today. And again, I'm very deeply moved by the other stories here, my fellow witnesses. Number one, as a parent, one of my goals since losing my son Joseph is to empower people with information. I'm not here to debate the science. The science is clear. Do these rare events happen? Absolutely. And there are folks here beside me sharing their experiences. And again, do not want to diminish those. But I think we have to really focus on the safety. And I've heard VAERS mentioned a couple times today. I just want to remind folks that there are other parts of the U.S. safety monitoring system, like the Vaccine Safety Data Link, CISA. VAERS is not the only part of that safety monitoring system. And I did want to just round back on the flu vaccine effectiveness. When Dr. Sullivan quotes upwards of 60%, it's really important to understand what that measurement endpoint is. And when we talk about 40 to 60%, it means against medically attended illness. If we would like to look at other endpoints, and that's really what flu vaccination is about, it's really good at preventing severe outcomes like hospitalization, disability, and death. And if we look at the figures for the 24-25 season, the preliminary vaccine effectiveness, and these are interim numbers, the final ones will come out from CDC in September, 63 to 78% effective in kids against hospitalization. So I think it's also important as a scientist that I point out that when we are talking about statistics and numbers, that we put those into context, and there are different measurement endpoints when it comes to vaccine effectiveness. So again, I'm a mom. That's why I'm here today. I'm trying to prevent what happened to me from happening to other people, but I certainly appreciate, and I also am very moved to hear you and Senator Blumenthal talking about collaborating on VICP at Vaccinate Your Family. We definitely think there can be improvements as well. We put out a State of the Immune report earlier this year that has some specific things that Congress can do. So I'm very excited to see that conversation moving forward. And again, thank you for your time and having me here today.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Next, we'll go to Ms. Cordingley.
Thank you. Yes, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. To speak for all of those that didn't have the chance to. I feel that we have a lot of growth. We are all here as parents. We want what is best for our children. We want to keep them safe. We want to keep them healthy. I think we can all agree on that that is our utmost priority here. The problem that lies is we have too many conflicts of interests. We have the pharmaceutical companies in the medical schools. Their roots are dug deep. And when you have the pharmaceutical companies that are selling the drugs, also teaching the doctors what needs to happen, you're having a broken system. You're having these doctors that are coming out of medical school, just like Dr. Sullivan said, where all you learned about vaccines was to memorize the schedule. You didn't learn about how to recognize the illnesses, and that's part of the problem. If we have something that is trying to prevent these illnesses, there's no 100%. These illnesses are still going to be around. Why are these doctors not being taught how to recognize these illnesses and a proper treatment protocol to help prevent any kind of adverse effects from those illnesses? So we may be focusing on vaccinations, but we still have to focus on the diseases and the illnesses at hand, because they will never be completely eliminated. And without that complete elimination, we still have to have the education there. And if we don't have that proper education and proper treatment plan in place, we're going to continue having both sides of where we have children that have passed from the illness. And then if we do not have the proper procedures put in place and we do not have that true saline placebo studies done to show the true safety and effectiveness, then we're going to continue to see our children be damaged and killed by the very thing that we are trying to protect our children in this world for. So thank you for allowing me to come here and to speak for all of the other parents that were not able to be here to speak from decades ago even. They matter, their children's voices matter, and I'm here to make sure that we make changes happen. Thank you.
Well, again, thank you all for your very important and I would say powerful testimony. On purpose, we sprinkled the witnesses together. We didn't just have 2 on one side and 5 on another. I'm hoping we bridge the gap. These are all true stories. They're all heartbreaking. There are good points made, I think, on all sides. And what we're trying to seek is the truth. We want to know exactly what's happening. We want integrity restored to science. We want our federal health agencies credible. We want doctors, advocating for their patients, first and foremost. So again, there are a lot of issues we discussed. Again, I also am pleased with Senator Blumenthal's willingness to work with me on some solutions. Again, I don't think there are a whole lot of solutions come from the federal government, but there are certain things we do have to do. We're up to our necks in this one, so I think there's an awful lot we can do, but it starts with understanding what the reality is, what the truth is. And again, I think you've really added to the conversation in a very constructive way. I think this was, from my standpoint, a very good hearing. I truly appreciate everybody's attendance. There may be other people with other stories to tell. I think if you're vaccine injured or know somebody who is, I think certainly Children's Health Defense. You can certainly contact my subcommittee's webpage. We have a whistleblower account. You can go on there and click here and enter your story. I hope people don't abuse that, but you're certainly welcome to do that. The hearing record will remain open 15 days until July 30th at 5 p.m. for the submission of statements and questions for the record. Thank you all. This hearing is adjourned.